Welcome to the Ingress Insights podcast, hosted by Pokemon Trainer Jay. Ingress Insights is a podcast about the Niantic game Ingress. Listen each week for the latest news, updates and rumours. Let us know your thoughts by leaving a voice message or emailing us at the links in the show notes.
Additional intel available.
Hello agents, today's episode is a special episode as you'll see by the title. In this week's episode we'll be covering Marvel World of Heroes along with one of the game designers, Jeff James, who worked on the game to tell us what happened kind of behind the scenes, what was planned, things like that in the upcoming interview. I'm just going to run through the introduction that the Niantic team gave for Marvel World of Heroes on their blog back in September 2022 first of all.
Hey there, this is Jeff James, game designer from Marvel World of Heroes, and you're listening to Ingress Insights.
The Niantic blog said, "A Marvel World of Heroes is an AR mobile game that brings the iconic Marvel universe into the real world. It is scheduled to launch globally in 2023. As the first Marvel game ever players become their own unique Marvel superhero, Marvel World of Heroes breaks new ground by extending gameplay into the real world as only Niantic games can. The development team has been hard at work to deliver on the fantasy of becoming your own Marvel superhero in the real world. We've interviewed two members of the Marvel World of Heroes team to get their thoughts on what it's working on the game, now that they can fully talk about it. So these come from Neo Melville, the lead game designer, and Liza Filona, the senior producer working on Marvel World of Heroes. I'm not going to go through the whole announcement there with all their thoughts on it, because obviously the main part of this podcast is going through Jeff's bits and talking with him. So I will link to the post and you can read through that at your leisure. Unfortunately, Marvel World of Heroes never really launched. It launched in a few beta areas but never launched worldwide. And there was the Niantic organizational update on June the 29th, 2023. And in that they mentioned, as a result, we'll be sunsetting NBA All World and stopping production on Marvel World of Heroes. And that was when they laid off around 230 staff. Again, this is a post I've been through before. I don't want to particularly bring it up again and read through the whole thing for everyone, especially for the people that are affected, because it's affected people I've interviewed and will interview in future on the podcast. So I don't want to bring any bad thoughts up for them. But again, I will link to it so you can read through it on there at your leisure. I will now get into the main interview, so please do enjoy the time that I spend with Jeff James, one of the game designers on Marvel World of Heroes. Hello agents, and welcome to a special section of the Ingress Insights podcast. For this special section, we have an interview with Jeff James, who worked on one of Niantic's titles, Marvel World of Heroes. And we'll go through some questions with him and discuss a bit more about that game that many people unfortunately didn't get to play. So if you want to introduce yourself first of all, Jeff.
Sure. Hey, I'm Jeff James. I was with Niantic working on Marvel World of Heroes, and I've been working in the game industry for about 20 years now.
Great. And obviously, like I said, unfortunately, most people didn't get to play, but I'm wondering how it got started off. So did Niantic approach Marvel, or did it go the other way around?
Well, it was interesting. So the Los Angeles team was part of a company called Seismic Games, and we co-developed a Marvel Strike Force with some folks who eventually got acquired by Scopely, where the game currently is. But yeah, we co-developed that, worked on Marvel Strike Force, had a great relationship with Marvel IP and with the people over there. And so when Niantic was looking to ramp up some projects, after the Seismic acquisition, the Seismic people were very excited and interested in making a new game. And that's how Marvel World of Heroes came to be.
That's cool. And what was your role on the game?
So I was a senior game designer. So I had the great privilege of working with a lot of incredibly talented people on a variety of different game systems, including tutorialization, character roster, campaign missions, reality shifting mechanics, avatar customization. And I also got to take point on narrative, dialogue writing, and cinematics development. So, I wore a lot of different hats, but it was very fun to do all that.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like quite a lot for one person to do.
Well, it's funny though, because in that type of game development setting, you have a lot of people who have cross-functional skills who can do lots of different things. So you have less niche focused people, and you have people that can do a whole lot of things. So yeah, a lot of fun working with folks like that.
You have to be a bit jack of all trades, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, I think so.
I know I mentioned that the game wasn't released, but it kind of was in some countries. It came out in beta. I remember seeing screenshots and videos, things like that. How was the reaction that you guys got from people that were playing the game beta?
Yeah, I mean, because we were in beta, things were still pretty light. We didn't have a ton of people playing since we were still iterating on a lot of designs, but early reactions were positive. We got a lot of really valuable feedback that we were iterating on, and we were excited about working towards a broader release.
That's good. And how did you, in the team, see that release as expanding and going forwards from there once it was out in the wide world, I suppose?
Yeah, so like one of the things that we were actively like working on polishing that wasn't really in the beta version was a way to like really individualize the main story in the game. Like the whole fantasy of the game was intended to be like create your own Marvel superhero. So, you could really not just define, your look, but you could also like manipulate what the style was in terms of like, if you were going to be more of an altruistic protector like Captain America or a more vigilante, type of superhero. And so, we had this, alignment system essentially that we were developing. It was, a light touch version of an alignment system, but still something that, would really help deepen the personal journey for the players. And, that was really fun to be developing.
Okay, so something where it would be like I wouldn't necessarily be playing the game in the same way as a friend that was playing if we'd gone down different pathways.
Yeah, exactly. So like for example, like one of the early like, story beats, Kingpin is like, trying to like take over like your neighborhood and you have some conversations with Daredevil where you can like kind of like indicate the type of superhero you're going to be and Daredevil warns you to not like go too deep and to be too violent or something. There's a line, you can't cross it. And so eventually you reach this point where it's like you can decide to try to hit Kingpin after he's getting arrested or to just let the police arrest him. And if you pick the more aggressive option, Daredevil's going to be upset with you and he's going to be showing up less frequently in the game asking you for help. So like that type of like dynamic that it's like your story could have Daredevil showing up more often or mine could have him showing up less often depending on the choices that we make. So you could kind of really personalize what that experience was like and the characters you would be interacting with.
Sounds good. And with you saying about Line Me and Cross and the recent Daredevil new
Mm-hmm.
series coming out,
Yeah,
just
speaking
made me
of
think
Daredevil,
about
woo, yeah, that's some
all.
heavy stuff if anyone's seen the new season. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen the first couple of episodes. It's quite
Yes.
intense at the start.
Yes. Well, why do they have such a habit of like, offing characters we love so much? Ugh, it's brutal. Disney Plus, you're killing me.
I know. And obviously, like the Marvel stories, whether it's comics or movies or games, whatever, they're quite intricate and interwoven. Was there a planned storyline for the game? You mentioned obviously starting off with
Mhm.
Kingpin. Is there anything
Yeah.
you can tell us about what the story beats were planned?
Yeah. So like the main story, I mean, I really can't go into detail about it because it's like it was so awesome that I feel like if Marvel wants to use it someday, I mean, they can, however they want to, so, I won't poison the well here with that, but what I can say is that one of the exciting things we got to do was create an original Marvel character. So like something that had never been in any comics, in any movies, in any games or anything, got to go through that full approval process and getting to see that character created and in the game and playing this really interesting pivotal role both as an antagonist and an anti-hero like in the first season, that was going to be really exciting and they were going to be in the main campaign for years to come. So yeah, the other thing I could say is that the game was firmly rooted in the Marvel multiverse, which really allowed us to tell some like interesting takes on stories, kind of like Marvel What If esque. It's like so there was like a infinite playground for us to come up with like alternate versions of characters and stuff like that. The other thing is that we were able to like really kind of like personalize the player's journey because like we had the ability to tell all of these kind of like unique elements because the game had like reality shifting where you're basically you're somebody who can like kind of like go between realities, kind of like what Scarlet Witch was able to do, think about it.
America, stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. As like, a Nexus being or yeah, something like that. Yeah. Every player had their own starting reality that was completely unique to them, that was completely unique to the decisions that they would make, completely unique to like what their player progress was at that particular time. and you could reality shift into shared realities essentially, where it's
Okay.
like players will see the same spawns or the same types of things, but you can always go back to your reality, which is your neighborhood, which you're trying to, keep safe. That really was able to combine the magic of, shared AR and geolocation, but also being able to have it be kind of like a personalized version of that by utilizing the Marvel multiverse.
That sounds cool. So if I was walking around with friends and I was in like Earth 907, they were in Earth 712, we could combine, see all the same things, do tasks together. Was that kind of the general idea
Mhm.
behind that?
Yeah, exactly. But then you also have your reality where you can go around and like, do your regular like cleanup work and advance the story, based on
Hmm,
the plot going on in your reality.
sounds cool. I know you mentioned obviously it's rooted in the Marvel multiverse. Was there any plans to link it to MCU shows or movies or certain comics or anything like that?
Oh, that would have been super fun. But at least at the point when we were developing it, we were just completely original, our own take. But at the same time, we tried to like reference the existing comics and MCU, films and stuff. And because of the nature of it being the Marvel multiverse, it's great that we could, claim that it's, part of the Marvel canon without actually disrupting the Marvel canon, right? So it's like we were able to lift on that broader Marvel canon to ensure that players had things that they could be familiar with, but where we weren't just like duplicating.
Just thinking about the original character you mentioned, was there, trying to think of how to phrase this, is there anything you could say about their superpower or did they have a unique superpower, one that we might have seen similar before? Or can you not
Um,
say?
well, the one thing I will say, which is not giving anything away, is that they also have the ability to basically shift between realities. So it's like you have this kind of like rival, this antagonist that also has this ability to do this. And, that was, one of the mysteries to try to unravel. Yep.
Okay, sounds cool.
Yeah.
And then I remember back when it was announced, the trailer showed like players getting Marvel powers like Cyclops' visor and things like that
Yeah.
and using them. Is there a character you would have liked to seen added to it personally before it got sunset?
Yeah. So we had a bunch of characters that had some incredible concept art and even 3D models, collectible gear, and everything made for them that we had planned for future updates. The two that I was most excited about were Gambit and Jubilee. I mean, I'm biased because I grew up with the X-Men animated series, the original one, and I mean they were just such two standout characters that really got to shine in that show. So getting to see Gambit's kinetic energy powers and just kind of like be able to use his effortless cool factor in the game would have been fun. And then also just Jubilee with her, youthful energy and her totally awesome energy blasts. I think, it would have been fun to see those things. And with the nature of what the game was, you can, mix and match abilities that you acquired, from, these allies. So, you could totally be, chucking cards, with Gambit and then, firing off fireworks with your hands, the next second. So, that could have been a real spectacle. Yeah.
Cool. And then with it being the multiverse, I guess there might have been different versions of them because I know in the past in the comics, Jubilee's been a vampire and then been cured of that and things like that. So could have had vampire Jubilee and regular Jubilee, for example.
So, I mean, that's one of the fun things that I mean, I think a lot of games have been able to explore that. Like even Marvel Strike Force, now has multiple versions of characters that you could collect. That we definitely could have gone down that route of like having different versions, of them. But I think initially we wanted to kind of focus on, classic takes, on a
Mm.
lot of characters, or maybe even like MCU adjacent, versions of characters if they're the kind of the more recent versions compared to like obscure versions of characters that like nobody remembers, from, comics of old, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was really fun because yeah, the character roster was one of the things that helped manage. So it was really cool getting to be able to explore different takes on characters, and work on them. Yeah, yeah. Vampire
And
Jubilee would have been a fun one to explore for sure. Yeah,
yeah, I
Vampire
remember that as
Jubilee
one of
with Vampire Jubilee with a baby would have been hilarious to explore. Yes.
my.
Yeah.
I do remember that was a bit of an abrupt thing for me when I was reading the
Ugh.
comics at the time, and I was like, surely she's going to get cured at some point, and
Yeah.
obviously it did.
Yeah. It's comics. Yeah.
Yeah. And with obviously all the work that went in, how close to the global release did the team feel they were?
I think it's kind of difficult to pinpoint because the way that it works when games like go into soft launch, I mean you want to take the time to like get the right data to refine things to get it to a place where you feel confident that you can do a global launch that you have like, the MVP of features, like, active. The game doesn't have to be perfect, right? But,
Mm.
still, it's like you want it to be at that place where you see what the roadmap is going to be like, for the future and everything. And I think we were still developing that. We were gathering data, so, really hard to know exactly, where we would have been, for launch. But the team was incredibly passionate and was working tirelessly to get us into a position for success.
Obviously, you unfortunately got sunset when there was the big Niantic restructuring and layoffs, unfortunately, on there. How was the mood in the team and the office when that news came in?
Well, like a year earlier, we had, a round of layoffs, already, at the
Mm.
company, and just the industry as a whole had been in a pretty volatile state already. So, it's like we were all heads down and focused on, getting the work done. So yeah, we didn't know it was coming, but yeah, it's always tough when a project comes to an end, and particularly when a studio gets shut down too, like what happened to the LA office. I mean, we were all super invested in what we were building. We saw what the game's potential was, but as is common in game development, the decisions on, what happens for these types of things, comes down to a lot of factors that are beyond control of the dev team. Heck, it's oftentimes beyond, whether the game is, ready or successful also,
Mm.
by the way. I mean, it's just, a lot of that stuff is out of our hands. So at the end of the day, I mean, we were really proud of what we were making and grateful to work with Marvel on making something so unique for the fans.
The game was using Niantic's map and point of interest system. I know there's other maps services available, so Jurassic World Live uses Mapbox and other systems use similar ones. Do you think Marvel might at some point revamp the game and use another map system or use the ideas at least in it?
I mean, we've seen Marvel like come up with all kinds of like unique things with their IP over the years. So I think
Mm.
Marvel is, always looking to explore new opportunities, in gaming when it makes sense. And I think augmented reality and geolocation still remains an exciting frontier. And, we're kind of just waiting on the hardware to really evolve to a point where it can really become accessible and, for people. I think that's the big thing that everybody's, looking out for. So, I wouldn't be surprised if Marvel didn't explore something like this again, once it makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's getting there with the hardware. You've got the Snap spectacles and things like
yep,
that. They're a bit big, but they'll get down in size, won't they, as technology evolves. And
for
it's
sure.
I can see a start there on it, but not quite there
Hmm.
yet. Obviously, we've touched on layoffs already, and the fact there's quite a lot of layoffs at game companies. Do you think there's a certain reason for that in game companies in particular, or do you think it's just in general there's a lot of layoffs at companies?
I mean, yeah, game dev, it's brutal out there right now. It's a bit of a mess, right? But I mean, layoffs have always been, a risk, in game development. But I mean, it's not just affecting games right now. It's affecting lots of different industries that are being disrupted right now. But in gaming specifically, I mean, the things that impact it, shifts in investment trends, have been happening recently. We can't ignore the impact of AI and automation, or at least the expectations by some that it, can like literally replace some people, which I mean, I think we are finding that that is most certainly not the case. But I mean, that doesn't mean that, decisions aren't being made, that, affect people. And then there's also the reality that, post-pandemic market correction, has happened. And a lot of
Mm.
companies, you know, had a lot of hires that they did during the pandemic because, gaming like really took off, during that time frame. A lot more people had, quote, more time on their hands, right? So, now that things have kind of like settled down a bit, I think, companies are seeing the sobering reality that they just can't, handle, having as many people on staff. So, yeah, I mean, the industry, it's constantly evolving, and while it can be challenging, especially for, all of us trying to make ends meet, I think devs, we're starting to find ways to adapt. We're starting to see, new studios pop up that are, much more focused on individual prospects. So yeah, it's been a really tough time, but hey, games will always be made, and I mean, it's the industry continues to grow despite that, and passionate people, they're always going to find ways to create things. So
I think just before we move on to the next bit, we'd have to
sure,
touch on the recent Niantic Scopely thing. Obviously, it was a rumor on Bloomberg a few weeks back, but now it's
yep,
happened that at least Pokemon Go, Pikmin Bloom, and Monster Hunter Now are all moving to Scopely, and then Niantic are retaining Ingress and Peridot. I think their Lightship system.
yep,
It's not obviously been finalized yet, but do you have any thoughts on that now it's all out in the open and no
I mean,
longer a rumor?
yeah, I mean, just from a, public information perspective, because, I don't know any more than anybody else does, but seems to make sense that Niantic would make that move, and it also makes sense that they would hold on to, Ingress and Peridot, because, I mean, those games are so near and dear to their heart. They're also original IPs that they have, so it makes sense if they want to continue like exploring development of things that using those and keeping those games alive would make a lot of sense. So I'm sure Ingress players would be happier that Ingress stays with Niantic than going to Scopely, I would think. But hey, who knows? Sometimes these types of acquisitions, things work out even better for people than they ever imagined. So yeah, but
No, we have to
yeah,
see
I'm
what
excited for the
happens.
future. Yeah, I'm excited for the future for all of those teams. Yeah.
And then for yourself, obviously, Marvel World of Heroes got sunset. What have you been up to personally since that happened and keeping yourself busy?
I mean, it's funny because I mean, I feel like I've been busier than I've ever been, in my life for quite some time now since then. So, but one of the great things though is that I've been able to be a stay-at-home dad because my wife and I just had a son, almost 10 months ago. So, I've been able to really spend a lot of time with him, in very, very early times, which a lot of people don't get that opportunity. So that's been, a rare, rewarding opportunity getting
Mm.
to help support my amazing wife more in the process, which is great. Beyond that, I've been able to dive into a lot of personal projects that had been on the back burner for years. One of them is that I'm co-writing a novel, which has been deeply fulfilling. So that's been very fun to be able to work on. I also recently started a new role at Redux Games as a senior designer, working on a few different projects that I can't talk about. On top of that, though, I mean, I also have my side hustle, as I call it, my tabletop game company, Iron Hippo Games. So I had a Kickstarter back in 2017 with my co-founder Donovan for Tournament of Towers, and then I've got two new games that I've been focusing on getting across the finish line, getting all production assets ready, and I'm going to do a new Kickstarter campaign this year that'll be a second edition for Tournament of Towers along with the two new games. So yeah,
Okay, so you get all three then if you back the Kickstarter at a certain level?
yeah, you got options basically. So you could back, one or all of them, is the type of thing. And, at a variety of different price points, but ultimately all of the games, they're very accessible for, younger gamers or also for super hardcore gamers. Because, I like to design things that can scale in terms of difficulty and complexity and that have like infinite replay value as well. So yeah, all three games, fit that mold.
I definitely back far too many board games on Kickstarter, so I'll probably be backing that as well when it comes up.
Don't we all, right? There's just so many games out there, and I will tell you, you don't go into developing tabletop games as a side hustle for the money. You do it because you love it, right? And so it's been really rewarding and really fun to be able to develop those, types of things. I just love making things that have, beautiful artwork, game mechanics that, are smooth, ensuring, everybody's having fun, at all times. That's another thing that I always, try to design for. And also that it doesn't take forever to set up or to like, break down either. So, quick to set up, easy to learn, infinite replay value. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, I've played a lot of games that take a lot of setup, like Call of Cthulhu and things like that, where you're setting up for an hour and then playing for longer.
Hey, and
So
there's
quick and easy
totally a place
ones.
for that. Yeah, there's totally a place for that, and there's totally an audience for that, and those games can be great too.
So you said the Kickstarter planning on launching this year at some point. Do you have a definitive date, or is it still everything being ironed out at the minute?
Yeah, still working on ironing out the details for the campaign. Really kind of like working on the marketing strategy right now to find the right audience because it's tricky. It's like it's a
Mm.
campaign for three games. It's not a campaign for just one game, right? So trying to find which game is the focus. Can I focus on all three games? Still trying to figure that out. But what I can promise is that the campaign will launch in 2025 and that all backers absolutely will get their copies of their games before the holidays, without a doubt. So that should be exciting at least. Whether you get, one or all three games or multiple copies of any of the games, you'll get them all. Yep.
I'll say here, if anyone hasn't backed anything on Kickstarter, it's very rare for things to show up on time. So that's a bold claim.
Yes. Well, I will say that, while I've only had one Kickstarter campaign up to this point, it's like we did not have any issues getting our games to our customers, in a timely fashion and getting things, produced, when they were ready to get produced. And we've got a couple different manufacturers that I've been working with. Wingo Games makes Tournament of Towers, and then Panda Games is going to be making Safari Spaceship and Stomp Stomp Dino. So just very exciting to be working with them. Very high quality products, very reputable brands. So, just really cool to get a chance to get those across the finish line.
I haven't heard of Wingo Games, but Panda Games, I've had a few things
Mhm.
from Kickstarter for, so I know that all their stuff's quality. I
Yeah.
can certainly vouch on that. Is there a pre-sign up page for the Kickstarter? I know there's generally a page before it goes live on Kickstarter where people can sign up for updates.
Yeah, so we've got a pre-launch page. So you can at least, sign up for getting like, email notifications, on when more information comes about and when the Kickstarter itself launches. One of the other cool things is that there's some components and some cards that are still TBD for a couple of the games that I want the community to be able to vote on, what they should be. So for Safari Spaceship, it's kind of an animal card like matching Space Race. And so I want to add 2 more animal types into the game, and I want people to vote, on what those animals would be. So if you sign up, you'll get a chance to be able to like help shape, what the game is going to be. That's cool. And then same thing for Tournament of Towers, the second edition. I'm going to be adding 2 new pieces to the game, so you get an opportunity to vote on which ones you like more, and those ones will get into the game. So yeah, just signing up for the email notifications, you'll get access to that. There's also the ability to become a super fan by, basically placing, $1 reservation down. I mean, the whole mentality of that is that people will pay more attention, for when the Kickstarter actually launches because they feel like they're literally investing in the project. Obviously, it's completely refundable. They don't have to, spend that dollar whatsoever. But if you spend that dollar, you're going to get some more like premium like components, including some foil cards that you can use in Stomp Stomp Dino, and some extra components that you can use, for the other 2 games. So, there's definitely like value in doing that I want to try to give to people that are interested. Yeah.
Yeah, essentially a pre-order bonus that you're getting
Yeah.
from backing it for $1 and then
Absolutely.
obviously doing the later bit on it. Cool.
Yep.
So I'll obviously include a link to that in the show notes and then let everyone know when the Kickstarter actually kicks off.
Beautiful. Yes.
On that. Finally, is there any parting words you've got to the Niantic or Marvel World of Heroes community that you want to let them know?
Sure. To all the Niantic gamers out there, whether, they play Ingress, Pokemon Go, Marvel World of Heroes, or any of the other, awesome games that are out there or that folks have worked on, thank you. I mean, honestly, we appreciate every single one of you. It's incredible to be able to make games that people enjoy playing, and I think the Niantic community in particular has really like, been able to like connect with each other, because of these things. We've heard stories about, people like meeting their eventual spouse, while playing these games, and it's very meaningful to know that, we could have created things that could help like bring you together. Because I mean, honestly, that's what it's all about. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's about all we've got to go through on there. So thank you for joining us again, Jeff. And
Of course.
I'll get you all moved on to the next bit of the podcast now.
Beautiful. All right. Good talking with you.
Thank you all for listening to that interview. I hope you enjoyed it. For those keeping count of closed Niantic games I've now done, I think I've got Transformers Heavy Metal, Catan World Explorers, and maybe Field Trip to go. Oh, and Truffle. So I've covered a fair few, I think. It's been interesting to hear the background, see what was going on behind the scenes of the Niantic games that most of us never got to play. And interesting to hear how things developed with Marvel as well from Jeff on the unique character that was going to be in the game and how things were going to evolve in the game. It's a real shame we didn't get to play. It sounds like it would have been really good. That's all from me for this special episode, though. I've released it on what's hopefully the finale of Daredevil Born Again Season 1. As I'm recording this, I've not seen all of it yet, so don't spoil it for me in the comments, but I will hopefully watch it by the time this releases. Thanks again, agents, for listening. Hope you have a great day and happy hacking. Thank you, agents, for listening to the latest episode of the Ingress Insights podcast. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can do that on a few channels. So on Threads under the name ingress.insights, on Instagram under the name ingress.insights as well. Twitter/X, which posts episodes of the podcast, is under Ingress Insights, no dot in that one. And you can also watch these episodes on YouTube under Ingress Insights Podcast. You can send us a voice message by visiting the podcaster's Spotify page. And finally, you can buy Ingress Insights merch, such as mugs, pins, t-shirts, by going to freepublic.com/user/ingress-insights. And on there, you'll see all the designs that we've got listed at the moment. There are some new ones that will be coming up at some point soon, but you can buy your Ingress Insights mug, hats, t-shirts, tote bags, anything like that you want. Thank you again for listening. Hope you tune in next week. If you do like the show, please do rate it on the podcast service you're listening to. I look forward to speaking with you all about Ingress again.
Intel package transferred.